New presentation going into interview questions, and this week I'll be talking about potential interview setup and questions for a government relations analyst at a water agency such as the Metropolitan Water District. It's actually an appropriate time for us to cover this material this week. Actually, I just had an interview at my current job for a promotion a couple days ago. Um, so this really allowed me to tie in reality with the theory. So getting into it, the role of a government relations analyst, specifically at a water agency, requires a deep understanding of legislative issues and political temperature in the area. You got to know the history of water legislation and bills, and environmental legislation and bills, and also the political temperature of how the various water agencies within a region interact and get along with each other, and what their history is and who the leadership is. And some of the leaders may have worked at one agency and then moved on to another agency, and uh, you can see some similarities in how those agencies are run now because of the shared leadership. And there's also emphasis on networking. This position, they're going to be required to travel a lot between uh, working at their home headquarters and then going to visit other agencies and going to their board meetings, but then also going up to Sacramento to speak with legislators and to network with lobbyists and lawmakers. It requires a critical and analytical eye to be able to read through the lines of legislation. And as I mentioned, frequent travel. And then because they have to be able to report back, there's going to be frequent presentations. Going to be speaking to their agency's board of directors frequently to give them the rundown of hot button issues. And then also even at network events and conference events related to the industry, being able to speak about their agency's position and what the plan is for the future. So the interview setup, because it's a government agency, this falls in line with some of the standards for the public sector. It's a multi-step, and the first is a practical exam, and then you have the second interview. Well, then if you pass the practical exam, then you get invited to a panel interview. This panel interview is external subject matter experts, so people who do not work at the agency you're applying for the role with. It's other people at neighboring agencies who are familiar with how your agency works and their interactions, and familiar with their own role as a government relations analyst at their own specific agencies. So they're the ones interviewing you. And then once you pass that, then you go on to a second interview, and that's when you're speaking to the internal leadership at the agency you'll be working for. And at this point, you'll be required to prepare a presentation on key legislative issues. It could be one thing that we have going on in California. Southern California is the Chino Basin Water Project, where we're trying to, not trying to, we are working towards reducing the amount of imported water that we're bringing in from the Colorado River and increasing our local supply. So maybe prepare a presentation on that and what that means and how you would go about handling that project from a legislative perspective. And then it's common to be presented with gotcha questions because you will be presenting to the board frequently. The board may ask anything that may be on their mind. You have to be familiar with everything in great detail. So there could be a few gotcha questions like, well, what do you think about this? Or, oh, PFAS, that's a harmful chemical. What does PFAS mean? And be able to come up and know your water terms. So potential interview questions. One could be, what current challenges do you see in the water industry? And then the second question is, I am a general manager at a neighboring water agency, and I am opposed to a bill that this agency that you're applying for supports. How would you persuade or pitch me to align or compromise to your viewpoint? Now, the desired response is they're looking for knowledge and preparation. So going back, what do you see as current challenges in the water industry? Well, we are coming out of the drought at this point, but we can't rest on our laurels and take this for granted. We must treat ongoing drought as the biggest threat to our water supply. So the biggest challenge is creating sustainable and renewable sources while still respecting the previous water agreements that we've set with neighboring water agencies and out-of-state agencies that we're importing from. And to do so, we must renegotiate some of the terms of these contracts with these other agencies, and that may require them to pay us greater fees, and that's definitely going to be a challenge to us because they don't want to pay greater fees because they have to pass that on to the public, and the public is going to it's going to be a political fallout because the public is going to definitely be upset that they have to pay more. But we are definitely charging too little for water supply, and the reality of the situation is, especially in the drought, is that we have to charge more for access to water. So one is coming to terms with the fact that we are operating from a standpoint where we are charging too little for a precious resource. So either we have to deal with the political fallout from raising prices, or we have to find other ways to increase the supply. And that is why we're going for the Chino Basin project, to reduce the amount of imported water we have to bring in and increase our local supply, thereby driving costs down and protecting, basically giving a win-win for everyone. Now, the second one, talking about how to persuade me for some controversial bill or something that I'm opposed to. This is coming from the interviewer. The interviewee must demonstrate their soft skills and political savvy because they'll be working with varying government entities and varying people with different personalities. Every person has a different personality. Every agency has its own cultural. So they want to see how you could negotiate and tiptoe on the line and maintain positive relationships without giving up your own agency's position. So an answer could be, sit down, have a face-to-face discussion, bypass the media and reports, and just have one-on-one conversations and really try to understand the history of the agency that that person is coming from and see exactly what are their own challenges and what are their own issues that they must be able to accomplish, and see if we can find a middle ground. Now, as far as related to the sample interview questions, I feel like these are a bit different because the behavioral questions are asking, okay, what would you do in this situation? They want to get a feel of you as a person, your personality. Whereas these questions are more about uh, not so much what would you do, but how would you do it. So it's less about emotions. That's what I'm trying to get to. It's less about the sample questions are more about how somebody would react emotionally. But I think it's how they could separate their emotions from the situation and display their knowledge and preparation and political savvy and put the agency first. Um, and then some of the other questions that were given, it's like, how do you pronounce your last name? Or what do you think of your current supervisor? Very personal. I think these interview questions are more in depth, really detailed, require critical analysis. So it's more of a knowledge check, if anything. Okay, so that wraps up my presentation for this week. Thank you, and I look forward to looking at your other presentations. And I'm running a little bit long this week, but I had a lot to say. Um, so apologies for that, and extra kudos for you if you stuck it out all the way. Take care.